Who would like to start off with the discussion about the focus strategy of some countries? Mr. Miller.
Well, I mean, I can give an example from, from the World Olympians Association, but also from rugby. We had an ambition in rugby to grow the World Cup, to make it more competitive. All the money that we had to invest in rugby around the world. This is my plea to legislators. Please don't treat international federations and national federations the same as you treat other businesses. It's not about making baked beans and putting profits into shareholders. It's about spreading the word about sport and putting your profits into the grassroots, so for the benefit of society. Anyway, advert over there. We wanted to improve the World Cup. We wanted to spread the game. What we said was we were going to put aside, instead of giving everyone a few $1,000s or whatever it might be, we were going to have a special fund, and we were going to invest millions in the second tier of countries. There were 8 countries in the second tier, because if you can get them up and running and increase the competitiveness of the World Cup, then more sponsors will want to be involved. You get more television, you'll have more money into the sport. And also if you can make the sport bigger in these other countries, again, more money would come in. And so we'd have more to invest, and then you can go down to the next tier, and then you can go down to the next tier. And over time, you could bring up the level of everyone. Now, I was the one who had the joyous task of going to regional congresses and saying to people, I've got some really good news and I've got some bad news for you as well. The good news is we're investing more in certain countries. The bad news is it's not most of you yet. But if this works and we bring more money into the sport, then there'll be more money for us to invest in all of you going forward. And once these 8 countries are firing on all cylinders, then this massive investment can also be made in the next tier of countries as well. And that, to me, is what he was talking about there, what they're trying to do in the Netherlands. You have to prioritize, you have to focus. There's only a certain amount of money to go around. And if you spend a little bit of money on lots of people, you won't necessarily get the same effect as if you spend a lot of money on a few people.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Helmond, in Europe we have a lot of small and smaller countries. Do you see the same strategy as in the Netherlands occurring?
I just discussed in the 2 minutes with Guido, and we all agree even bigger countries have to focus on certain sports. If I look on Germany, the country I know best, we have an 130 million grant from the federal government for elite sport. So that will be discussed every year, but there's no big increase inside. So we have to deal with that. So money is one thing, but there's at least a second very important factor. Even if enough money is involved, like in German football, we had a time 10 years ago where German football was not very successful. We had not a lot of talents, and German football changed completely the strategy, how to detect new talents, how to work with coaches, or to hire new coaches that coming from universities, not always the old-fashioned football players with no academic background that we had in the past. So you see in the last years what happened with German football. So it's very important to have money, but to think more strategic, to be at the top level of development, that is even more important.
Okay, thank you very much. Is that the case, the same in Belgium, Mr. de Bond?
It is I think it's clear that more than before we must make choices. It is clear that more than before we must make choices, and all the colleagues in Europe are doing that more and more, I believe. And as said, okay, there is a certain amount of money that is available, and then on basis of a number of parameters, and this can be different from country to country. If in a particular country there is no interest at all for one of the sports in the Olympic program, then you will not invest in that. But as it was said in the presentation, you can keep it as an open system. If tomorrow you have by chance a so talented guy or a girl in one particular sport that is not popular in your country, of course, then you take them. But and it's because you need today 300 disciplines on the Olympic program, 28 sports, 300 disciplines. To make the medal, and this is an ambition of a National Olympic Committee to have more medals. This is an ambition, and we must not deny that. It's not negative to try to get more medals. So, but then you must make choices. You cannot find all the top coaches in the world or the necessary top coaches to bring your athlete to the top. You cannot invest in, let's say, everything what is linked to scientific approach and all that. You cannot do that for all the disciplines and all the sports. So you must make choices. And I'm very happy that our Dutch friends now will limit it to 55 projects. Congratulations. We are trying to do something similar in Belgium, but it will be very difficult. The Flemish community decided that they will put their energy in 10 sports. The French community will do something similar, but they don't do it in the same sports. And then sometimes we have also our vision on a number of things. So first of all, we must agree on in which sports and which disciplines we will invest. But choices has to be made, and I'm sure that not only in Europe, even China is doing that. China is not investing in the 300 disciplines that are on the Olympic program. We have no alternative. It's the only way to do.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Ooyen.
Yeah, it's interesting in the discussion. I mean, on our level, we don't make difference, of course, in any sport. But what we do is thinking about, should it be an investment, for instance, in coaches? Shouldn't be it not an investment in more sustainable actions, who can then, in fact, make a sort of basis, a solid basis, where you have your talent identification, where you have good dual career projects so that students can combine study and the career. I know there is a big discussion about, let's say, the fees or the salaries of athletes in general. That's where we don't touch. But if you think that if you're talking about priorities, I'm always a bit surprised that the priorities is the discussion about different disciplines, instead of trying to invest in a system where, for instance, coaches or performance teams and good arrangements with schools, universities are, I think, the first priority.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Julian, what do you think will be the long-term effects of such a strategy for a country or for certain sports?
I'm not quite sure, but I don't think they'll be terribly positive. I think the two most striking trends in relation to elite sport at the moment is the increasing investment by a relatively small number of what we might call sports powers, maybe 25, 30 countries at the most that have the financial capacity to invest more heavily in elite sport. And the second trend is the one that's been referred to, that is greater selectivity within each country. Countries are either exploiting their historic advantage, and I suppose the Netherlands in skating is one example of that, or by a result of analysis of where you see the weaknesses in competition within the existing Olympic program. And historically, in the 1970s and 80s, they were often women's sports because those were still maturing as Olympic sports. It might be in cycling, rowing, as opposed to track and field. And I worry about the consequence of that greater selectivity. What happens to the sports where we either feel that the intensity or the quality of competition is so great and the cost of achieving success within that sport is too great that we drop that sport. So I think the distribution of money will be increasingly concentrated with, I think, negative effects for those sports that are left out. The third element, I think, is politics. That what keeps, I think, some sports being funded in some countries is a perception of the political risk of dropping them. So if I use my own country, if you were being brutally businesslike about the investment of resources in the UK, you probably wouldn't invest in track and field because the cost in relation to the return is not very great. I think most countries would, if they were looking at it in strictly business terms, would not invest in hockey because you have to maintain a squad of, 25, maybe 30 athletes for one medal. It's not worth it. And so there are serious consequences for some sports, team sports in particular, and for, I think, a narrowing of the focus. And I don't think that can be good for elite sport generally. Okay,
thank you very much. Because of the time, unfortunately, we don't have any time left for questions from the audience. But I very much would like to thank you for your contributions and for your presence here. I would like an applause for Mr. Mike Miller, Mr. Barry Julian, Mr. Bart Ooyen, Mr. Guido de Bont, and Mr. Volker Helmut. Thank you very much.